Hello and welcome to this special edition of Suits and Boots, the TDI Sustainability podcast series, in conjunction with Resourcing Tomorrow. In this series, speakers at this year's Resourcing Tomorrow's event discuss some of the key themes that will be covered at the conference. I'm Assheton Stewart Carter, Executive Chair at TDI Sustainability and your host for today. Critical minerals are not only important, as their name suggests, but increasingly strategic. This episode maps the key drivers of this interest in mineral criticality, copper's elevation to critical, shifting geopolitics, and at the midstream bottleneck in refining and processing. We unpack practical incentives for lower impact supply, from smarter recovery and co-product strategies to renewable power integration and trusted standards that strengthen market confidence. Our expert panel examines the reality of circularity, useful but no substitute for new supply, and how AI and remote sensing are reshaping both exploration and efficiency. We also discuss permitting pressures, the sheer scale of new projects required to meet future demand, and why international alliances will be essential in achieving these goals. One key takeaway: build clean, transparent, and circular midstream industries to succeed in the critical decade ahead. I'm delighted to be joined today for this discussion by Juan Igancio Diaz, Erez, Ichilov, and Richard Taylor. Juan Igancio Diaz has been the president and CEO of the International Copper Association since 2024, with more than 18 years of experience in leading complex businesses with major corporations. He's directed sustainable technology implementation across the energy, mining, and transportation sectors. Throughout his career, Juan Igancio has held positions where he was able to develop a strategy for the institutions he worked for and to drive innovation. A theme that can be detected is one of continual change and improvement. My observation is that his leadership role at the ICA follows this theme and applies this to advance the collective voice of the association's members and copper's role in a global economy that is in transition to become more sustainable. I'm joined too by Richard Taylor, who is the founder of Battery Britain and a co-founder of Green Lithium, where he has championed the development of the UK's first commercial lithium refinery. Richard also chairs the Institute of Directors Natural Resource Group, which focuses on topics surrounding the protection of the environment and sustainable development. He has spent more than a decade in the energy and natural resource sector, with roles in Petrofac, Maersk Oil, and Deloitte. I know Richard is a hard-working industry diplomat for clean energy production. And finally, I am joined today by Erez Ichilov, who is a critical minerals expert based in New York City. He's a seasoned mining, metals, and physical commodities executive, director, advisor, and investor with a legal and financial background. He served as managing director of Traxys Projects, the investment arm of the Traxys Group, for 11 years. Erez founded Cedrus Arbor LLC in 2024 to focus on responsible mining of battery materials and other critical minerals, and on developing sustainable processing technologies to support the energy transition. Welcome, Erez, Richard, and Juan Igancio.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Great to have you all on this podcast. So I thought we'd start by setting the scene around the energy transition. And, you know, we've been told for a while now that we're entering into a era of price suppression as production globally meets demand, at least in the short and medium term. But then at the same time, access to those minerals due to restrictions triggered by policies that are geopolitical nature, what was once abundant seems now less certain to be. In short, the critical minerals market seems to be evolving pretty fast. So what I want to ask each of you, just like a kind of a quick fire round to get us started, is what do you see are the current key market trends overall, and which commodities do you think have the greatest potential, which are the ones to watch in terms of their sustained demand, and why? A big question, I know, but we have a very experienced panel here today. And perhaps I'll start with Erez.
Yes, well, first of all, I want to congratulate Juan Igancio that copper was added to the critical minerals list by the USGS just a few weeks ago. So everyone knew that copper is front and center of electrification and energy transition and anything associated with that. But now it's also defined as critical, which I think is very much important. But what we've really seen, and I think was a narrative in recent months that just kept humming and buzzing and eventually became really, again, front and center of all discussions is the understanding that mineral security is basically national security. And we've seen almost like an OPEC moment with rare earth elements that are necessary, for permanent magnets. And that's become something very, very important. And we just saw a couple of days ago the American-Australian agreement in that context. And other things that we're seeing is that under probably the same for the same reasons, dual-use materials such as antimony and tungsten are becoming very important. And antimony is fire retardant, but it's also armor-piercing material. And also the minor tech metals such as germanium and gallium, which are critical for everything that has to do with communications, IT, etc., are also there. So I think we sort of had a bit of an OPEC moment. The 1970s are back, but it's not oil this time. It's all these materials, the processing technologies, and the equipment that became the focal point of discussion and where the markets are moving. And we saw that also in the stock markets when prices of some of the stocks that were associated with these materials went up 5x within days.
Great. So, Richard, turning to you, you heard there that from Erez that defense, national security is driving some of these critical minerals. But from your point of view, in the battery market, what do you see are the most hot to watch minerals, critical minerals?
Well, first of all, I think Erez is exactly right. We need to look at this holistically. It comes from lots of different sectors. Defence has taken a real front row seat recently in the past weeks, and it's really put the focus on it. But it's put the focus on many different critical metals, including the lithiums, the cobalts, and anything that is going to help this energy transition. So without repeating what's already been said, it's been a great thing. Yep. Share prices have gone up, but certainly a lot of them have also come down in a week. But it's the ones that are going to help us through this energy transition: the manganese, the graphites, the coppers, anything that's going to help from the energy side. Especially we're looking at AI, looking at all the big data centers, everything that needs to be to build all these things, and from the battery side, it's we've had a bit of an uptick and focus on lithium, but in my eyes, and as you'll find out through the most of this conversation, I think that really lithium and the battery supply chain, it's about the midstream, and it's the midstream that we need to be focusing on. It's the midstream where there's a bottleneck, and we're going to get into that. But yeah, I agree. Defense has created a big spotlight on everything critical minerals very recently, which is very exciting.
Great, thanks. And Juan Igancio, you were congratulated earlier that copper has made the critical minerals list, which hasn't been bit, I guess, because it's quite abundant. But copper is very much the mineral and the metal to love. It's the thing which can be relied on to pass electrons through it, so needed for the electrification of our economy. But different countries have different lists for critical minerals. Can you reflect a little bit on what are the different approaches from different countries from your point of view and in the copper market? And do these different approaches that countries take, or blocks like the EU, does that hamper or enable planning for copper and copper production? What are some of the examples that you can take that approaches are taken by countries to identify the critical list, and what are the merits and dismerits of those?
I want to agree that the critical mineral space is moving really quickly, but rather than just looking at the short-term trends, it's very interesting to focus on what is driving this change. Where is this change coming from? And it's worth mentioning these mega trends, right? These global forces like electrification, urbanization, and climate change, and of course digitalizations, that are creating a huge demand not only for copper, but for lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite. Well, around the world, copper is being recognized as essential for both energy and digital transitions. As Erez mentioned, in the United States, copper is now in the list of the USGS for critical mineral. Now, if we go to the producers, like, for example, Chile, where I'm from, and Peru, copper is not only strategic, is the economic foundation of those countries. So each region has a different approach. The EU is focused on recycling, building resilience, and diversifying supply. And the US definitely wants to boost the domestic mining to help local manufacturing and at the same time strengthening the global partnership. And in countries like Chile and Peru, they're looking at ways to produce more sustainably, yes, but at the same time, they're looking to add local value and increment the quality of life of the communities surrounding the mining sites.
Great. So there's this surging demand as these minerals and metals, materials get onto the critical lists. But at the same time, there's concern by communities and governments and regulators about the potential harm or impact that mining can have. And so we see that there's also responsible sourcing. While some of that responsible sourcing regulations have been rowed back a little bit, it's still there and it's still quite strong. So, Juan Igancio, from the point of view of the International Copper Association, what can the International Copper Association do to give confidence to the markets and to the consumers that the growing demand is met with responsible production and it contributes to sustainable development locally, just like you have mentioned?
Sure. Well, at the International Copper Association, we always say and we claim that the world doesn't need just more copper, it needs better copper. And members of ICA are taking this very seriously. We have a good example with the copper mug that has become the main global standard for responsible production around the world. Or the LME, the London Metal Exchange, now is using International Copper Association's own methods to measure the carbon footprint of sustainable copper. So today, producers are cutting emissions, they're improving energy efficiency and ramping up recycling. If you see in places like Europe and Japan, about half of the copper demand is already met through the recycled materials. So that is what we call circular economy in action.
Got it, yes. And Erez, we've heard there that the certifications, voluntary certifications like the copper mark, and where exchanges also have a set of standards or indicators. You've spent a large part of your life as an investor and also a trader, and those that job can be quite fast moving, and you don't always have time to do in-depth due diligence and dig deep into whether a mine has the Copper Mark brand or a similar brand. What are the instruments that investors and traders can use and do use to try and promote responsible sourcing or responsible trading potentially?
Well, first of all, there are the the certifications and the tracking and the various efforts, including to record sources on the on the incorruptible blockchain ledger to provide more certainty exactly in these instances that you're talking about, where fast-moving transactions need to be vetted relatively quickly, and you don't want to make mistakes. But from the investment side, where you're taking a bit of a more long-term approach, and many time, what you want to see really is first of all their approach, the new approach, where they sort of understand that a critical minerals project, or for that matter any extractive industry, or cannot be viewed just as an independent node within a huge universe that ignores everything else in the process itself, in the mining and the processing, etc. We don't want to see cherry picking. We want to see that whether it's a polymetallic resource or whether there is useful waste, we want to see co-products, we want to see byproducts. We want to see basically that, if an animal is slaughtered, everything is consumed. You don't cherry pick, you don't leave like we did in past generation, very mineralized, rich, huge mountains of tailings. Try to do as much as you can in the first iteration. Just to give you an example of companies, with their heart in the right place, which I think is the most important thing, is Nuvamont Graphite, which as Pallinghurst Traxxas we invested in since 2018, I think the first time, a vertically integrated natural graphite project in Quebec that's going to make the spherical graphite that goes the natural part of the AAM of the anode active materials in lithium ion batteries. So their mine is located in an area where there's a lot of outdoor activity. There's biking in the summer, and there's snowmobiles in the winter, etc. So they designed the roads and the slopes and the sequence, thinking about the next use of the land as it will be given back to the public, and then as it becomes part of the recreation areas accessible to the public once again, you won't need to invest too much into retrofitting it because that's already part of the thinking. So I guess it's moving from a node to a multi-dimensional, very connected project is something that for us is very important as a selection criteria.
Turning to Richard, lithium has been this mineral, this material, which is a very saintly material, I would say, because it's had this halo around it because it is going to be the savior for the electrification, as it plays a big part in batteries. But it's not without impacts either. There is association with water, operating water scarcity, reducing the table of the water balance, and how that has knock-on effects on Indigenous people's rights. But you've been an advocate for lithium, and you've been in the industry a long time. What can you tell us about the innovations that have been put in place to ensure that this halo is as bright as it can be as when the lithium first came into the public's eye?
Thank you. Well, I'll talk about hard rock lithium. So just to sort of slightly dodge the water table question a bit, but it goes really to what was just said. It's Erez is spot on. It's the sum of the parts. If we're going to do this, there's no direct answer to how we can decarbonize a certain mineral or get it to the best possible green credentials. It's about doing everything we can along the way. So giving this a real world example, I'll talk about the green lithium refinery, which is being built in Teesside in the UK. It's hard rock lithium refinery. And the way that it goes about doing this is first and foremost is the technology selection that they have selected for the refinery. So unlike many other refining technologies that may be adopted in, say, China, green lithium's adopted an alkali leach processing technology, which comes with a lot of efficiencies to it. So it's already by design a lot more efficient in the processing, a lot less waste, uses a lot less carbon. But then there is also the little things you can do along the way. There's heat recovery. So where things are heated up in the calcinization process, they're reintroduced later on for heating other things. And so then it's selection on fuels. Where can there be a high, in the calcinization, can it be electrically calcined? Can it be a combination of natural gas and hydrogen? And then eventually full hydrogen calcinization. So you've got the technology, you've got all the various different sums of the parts of the process and of how you can reduce, but then you've got the location. Can the location give you those further carbon reduction abilities? So being near abundant renewable electricity. In Teesside, it's windy. There's a lot of wind turbines out in the North Sea that are generating a lot of renewable electricity that come on shore right in Teesside. One I really then like and enjoy is what Green Lithium have done with their co-product. It produces an aluminium silicate as a co-product, and they have basically developed a market and got lots of interested customers in the construction industry that want to take this as a product. So it's exactly to what Erez was saying. It's using the whole animal, nose to tail, and making sure there's nothing left.
That's great. Thanks, Rich. And I'm not sure if the analogy of eating the whole animal works, what I'm going to ask next, but maybe the sum of all parts does, if we turn the conversation to circularity. Juan Igancio, what are the demand dynamics and evolving global policies that are impacting copper markets? In particular, when we look at circularity, I think about 30% of copper is recycled, but copper, I think the biggest demand for copper is still in the construction industry, and the time that the copper stays in a building is quite a long time, so it's not as though it's readily available. So what are the implications for this move for greater circularity in the EU, as you mentioned, on the copper market, and how's that going to play out?
Well, indeed, around 40% of the world's copper demand is met with recyclable copper, and that's a very good news. Going to the question, today we see that there's two big things that are shaping the copper markets right now. First, the demand is being driven by the mega trends that we mentioned: electrification, digitalization, and urbanization, and these are very copper intensive. And second, governments are trying to figure out how to secure the supply responsibly. Area recycling helps, but it won't be enough to meet the growing demand. We will need new mines and new refineries, and that means faster permits, clear rules, supportive policy that actually encourage investment instead of slowing it down. It's very necessary to mention. I mean, if the copper demand will double by 2040, the world must bring online an equivalent of one Escondida. Escondida mine is the largest copper mine in the world. We need one Escondida a year for the next 15 years. So the real challenge here is to close the gap and to make sure that ambition and executions go hand in hand. We need that.
And just to press on that a little bit, so absolutely message received well that there's always going to be a gap. But I guess some folk might ask, should the industry be looking to see how more copper can be recycled? Or do you think that it's maxed out there, that as much copper is being recycled as possible?
We're seeing that the recycling industry is going to grow a little bit. But the point is that it is impossible to meet the demand with only recycling. We need both. We need more mining and more recycling.
And Richard, in the lithium and the battery industries, generally lithium and nickel, for example, recycling rates still remain quite low. The UK has no primary production. Is this an opportunity for the UK to play a greater role, and other non-producing countries play a greater role in building the infrastructure for circularity, for recycling, the middle of the value chain, as you mentioned in your opening remarks?
Absolutely. It's midstream. If you have not got these natural resources in your geology, then how can you come to any kind of partnership or hold any kind of strategic standing in a partnership with anybody? You need to bring something to the table. So here in the UK, what can we bring to this table? Well, we do have a few minerals that have been looked at and starting to be produced in very small quantities at the moment in Cornwall, and the guys down there are doing a great job. But there does need to be more. And how can we do that? Well, we can go into the arena of the midstream and the refining, and this is what the UK traditionally, looking on the northeast coast of England, has been fantastic at. Processing, chemical processing, steel production, petrochemicals, everything like that. It's completely set up for. It's got the workforces, the deep water ports, the energy, and the know-how. So it's a prime opportunity to use areas of legacy industry, and of course, the energy. It's got the opportunity to use this legacy sort of brownfield industry sites for the midstream, whether it's the rare earths or whether it's lithium refining. And it's not just Green Lithium that have cottoned on to this. It's many. It's Tees Valley Lithium. There's lots going on up there. And so I think primary refining is a big one, but also then, as we say, the recycling part of it.
And of course, China is the biggest recycler because of their huge domestic market, but also because they import some secondary materials, some end-of-life materials. Would a policy correction also have to be for the UK and other countries who don't have that natural endowment, be to loosen what is allowed into their country to be recycled? Otherwise, these midstream industries that you want to build won't have the feedstock to survive.
Absolutely. We should be prioritizing getting those batteries and keeping those batteries and the materials in them in the country. It's not been given the focus that it needs, but you're very right. I think in time there's going to be an awakening, and we're all going to know it.
Great. So we've heard a lot about technology and how that's been applied to the mine. I just want to spend a little bit of time focusing on AI, artificial intelligence. And, depending on who you listen to today, there's either the doom-mongers who say this is going to strip out jobs and de-skill, when there's others who say that this is going to enable humans to be kind of more productive and focus on what's really important, especially in the backdrop of declining populations. But what do you see, Juan Ignacio, regarding technologies and the solutions we are seeing that they can bring to advance things like exploration or improved productivity or recovery and even sustainability? What have you seen in the copper industry?
Well, what we see is really exciting times for technology, especially in copper. When you see Europe and Japan, we're seeing an impressive recycling system that keeps all the material in circulation. In Latin America, companies are finding very smart ways to manage waters, like using desalination and recycled water for mining operations. There's some minings that are really solving this problem at 100% using water from the ocean. In Canada and Australia, we have new exploration tools that are helping find deposit much faster and with less impact. And these are based on artificial intelligence models and also more efficient drilling. So we see technologies. And when you see exploration, when we talk about exploration, we're basically talking about the R&D of mining, research and development of mining. And it's essential if we want to keep the supply growing. They go hand in hand. We need skilled people, and we need better and new technologies to make it faster and to make it more sustainable.
Yeah, and as long as I've been in the industry, it's always been a concern about how does the industry build a pipeline of good talent and how does it attract talented people, and rather than going to other more popular industries. And I think now with the technology that the industry has to automate mines and control mines remotely means that the control centers can be near urban centers and be more kind of family friendly. So maybe that's one good thing. Yeah. Erez, you gave us a great rundown of all the different sort of innovations in technology, but when you in your remarks, but one of the things I picked up on there was around surveillance and satellite imagery. And with your hat on as a former trader, what I was thinking is that if you're trading, you've got to have some very rapid transactions. It's quite hard to do the due diligence, as we mentioned, but won't surveillance help on that? So you won't need to have certifications and due diligence so much. You could actually do remote sensing and satellite imagery. And I was in China the other day in the tech hubs of China, and there's a huge emphasis on what they call low altitude economy, essentially drones and coupled with surveillance. Is that going to be the future of how we monitor mines, which we previously, up until now, see as being remote?
I think it's more a tool within the industry for oversight and for control and for enabling the embedding of real-time responses on anything from safety to operations, etc. It could be, of course, used as well for just keeping security and safety and those aspects, and of course, from a different angle. Data collection at the exploration phases and later on, as was already mentioned here, there is of course a level, and actually in infrastructure and earth moving, contractors and clients have been using drones for several years now to basically monitor and to audit, in essence, the reports and bills that are then provided to the customer and cross-reference. We do see, of course, that trading and online trading and fast-moving trading and algorithms associated with that, whether it's in equity, in money, in cryptocurrency, and in physical commodities, are becoming more and more important. In essence, you have machines trading against machines and algorithms trading against algorithms. We're going to need intermediates still, and the data to be analyzed and packed and served as something that's usable without being processed too heavily in real time by the commercial partners.
Juan Igancio, thinking then about the resilience of supply chains, you mentioned that we'd have to build a new Escondida every year to meet the demand. If you're thinking from the point of view of the downstream or of national security and countries trying to secure supplies of copper, what's the strategy to make supply chains more stable?
Okay, well, thank you for that question. First, I would like to mention that we're transitioning today from a fossil fuel intensive world to a material intensive world. When we look at the downstream, when we look at the manufacturers of technologies, we see that there's huge challenges, right? In this fight between the materials around the world, we see more and more that the world, the end user, the downstream, is demanding certain things that are not only price. Price is not everything, it's a big component. But they're trying to choose that material that is circular, that is available. They're looking for responsible production, for carbon footprint, and for material efficiency. So there's a huge competition. Some big countries, some societies, some companies are making sure that that copper and other materials are available. Good examples are Argentina today, the United States, many places in Europe, and especially in Asia.
Great, thank you. And this is potentially a controversial topic, but I feel I can't go without asking it. What we've seen recently coming out of the present U.S. administration is executive orders to start to look at the development of deep sea minerals, which covers these many of these critical minerals. It's been called a battery in a rock. Do you see, and there's potential that some of these minerals might start commercial production, some of these developments might start commercial production in the next 2 or 3 years. Do you think that the deep sea minerals are going to play a part in the future minerals mix?
The topic of today is that the U.S. is doing a lot to secure and to allow and to unleash mining in the United States. And they're taking steps that are clear. We need to see them in action, but there's some steps that they've been taking to clearly increment the production of copper in the United States.
I think that deep sea mining will gradually become part of the upstream, and it's not necessarily an American phenomenon. We're talking about international waters, and I heard that I believe the Norwegians are looking at that, and the Chinese are looking at that, and so on. So this, it doesn't solve for everything, but but it could add, especially I suppose for NMC, because I believe there's a lot of manganese and some cobalt in most of these nodules that could be part of the issue. But we need so many, the quantum of what we need in the next decades to actually meet the demand of all to match all these mega trends that my colleagues were talking of earlier. We won't be able to recycle our way out of it, as much as I am involved in recycling projects and in urban mining, etc. And it won't be just one region or one, whether oceanic or terrestrial type. We'll just have to do everything everywhere and all at once, like I think there was a movie called like that a few years ago, and that will be the approach. So it's more about how we do it. We have to do it safely, both onshore and offshore.
Great. Well, thanks so much. I'd like to end on kind of a little bit of a crystal ball closing and looking at the future. And Juan Igancio, you're optimistic, of course, about the demand and the need for more and more copper. What could go wrong and how can we overcome it? I'm thinking that in the US and in the OECD countries generally, we're bringing back on shore some of these mining projects. And if we're successful in expediting some, or at least shortening the permitting process, what about local communities who aren't used to seeing so much mining as is likely to happen? Are they going to be a hindrance to producing these minerals and these metals, and how do we overcome that?
Well, definitely, you're right. We need more copper, and we don't need more copper only for the local economy. We need more copper to meet the demand of the society in order to have a more sustainable world. I mean, the world, the people, the society are demanding electrical vehicles, renewable energies, data centers, technology. You want to use phones, we want to use computers, the internet. We need more copper. So this is not an option. It will double. We need to produce more. And I see that the US is taking steps to help permitting. That's the biggest bottleneck that we have, right? And we're not asking the world to be more flexible in the requirement for a copper mine. We need faster permitting. We need to shorten the time. So you cannot take 17 years for a copper mine. So we were talking about deep sea mining. It's an amazing technology. It may work, but how long will it take?
So if we don't have a magnanimous and forward-looking local populations, we need strong leadership to make this happen and complete the transition safely. Erez and Richard, for you two, looking towards 2026 and beyond, what are the trends and disruptors that you believe will shape the critical minerals landscape? I'll start with you, Richard.
Well, just as a statement, I think I'll say that the energy transition is a materials transition. Whoever builds clean, transparent, circular supply chains will own the future. If you're a country that's been blessed with natural resources and critical minerals that are a part of this emerging economy, then that's great. You've got to get good at extracting them in the most friendly and an efficient way possible. But then everyone has other things to play for, or other things to play their role in. London is a finance capital, for instance, but also the UK and Europe as a potential big midstream part of this, and then downstream manufacturing to add that. So there's plenty of things people need to play for. What governments need to realise is that you can't make a partnership with anybody if you haven't got something to leverage. So you need to get good at something, or you need to bring something to the party to be able to be part of one of these alliances. And I think that's what people are starting to realize, is that's what the future is going to look like.
Perfect. Loud and clear. Erez, close us out with the one trend that we haven't yet heard that we should be monitoring over the next few years that's going to affect the critical minerals industry?
If there are substantial energy savings in terms of how data is processed, how much electricity AI actually consumes, similar to what happened with Bitcoin a few years ago, when the energy required for proof of work went down by 99% because some of the smart guys solved for something. So that's potentially a disruption in terms of the demand for electricity, and then for materials that will be required to generate and to distribute and to store this energy. And another thing, but that's in terms of how we make our energy, nuclear fusion.
Great, thank you, Erez. That's a great way to finish, and that's quite a wide-ranging conversation we've had, taking us from critical minerals mining to data mining, and Erez almost took us off on a tangent into nuclear fusion and fission, but we'll save that for the Resourcing Tomorrow conference. So it just leaves me to thank the panel. Thank you very much, Erez. Thank you, Juan Ignacio. Thank you, Richard, for joining us. And we look forward to continuing the discussion later next month. The minerals and metals that our speakers have discussed today are all critical for the energy transition, and it is clear from this discussion that their future depends on responsible production, innovation, a greater emphasis on circularity, especially recycling, and policy that encourages value chain partnerships and an honest appraisal of countries' economies' comparative advantage. Please check out the rest of this special series Resourcing Tomorrow podcast on the TDI Suits and Boots podcast channel. We hope to see you at this year's event, where the conversation on the critical minerals set to shape the next decade will be continued. And you can hear more from Erez, Juan, Ignacio, and Richard. I'm Ashton Stewart Carter. Thank you for listening.